cents short of a dollar. The show we give our 2 cents and keep it 100. We're your hosts. That's Motiz and I'm Rue. Today we want to talk about some boxing news we got coming up in I think November. So Devin Haney agrees to fight Brian Norman Jr. at welterweight. So a lot of things going on there all simultaneously. But first things first. Do you give props to Turkey Al Sheikh for saying, "Hey, Ryan Garcia, you don't perform, you don't fight"? Because the Devin Haney Ryan Garcia fight seems set in stone. Even Rolly Romero was just like, it doesn't matter what happens, they're still gonna fight. You know what I mean? When people were saying, "Oh, Rolly, but what if you win the Ryan fight? Would you be interested in fighting Devin?" He was like, "It doesn't matter. They already looked past me. They already got that set up." But that looks not be the case, as Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney is not happening next. So what do you make of Turkey Al Sheikh saying, "Hey, you don't perform, you don't fight"?
Yeah, I think that's how it should be, right? It's one of those things, and I think Rolly was just so focused on the fact that they signed a contract prior to, and was like, oh, they're still gonna fight it and push it, and Turkey Al Sheikh, you can tell he's at least based off his actions, he's not just driven solely by the sake of just money. He's like, nah, I'm gonna just make the right fights, regardless of how the fighters feel. So I think he did the right thing. I mean,
Yeah.
and honestly, we're not so high on Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, especially after the performance that happened both with Haney supplemented by Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia didn't put on a good showing either. He stopped throwing punches, and we know what happened with Haney and Ramirez. So
Yeah. So, I mean, from Devin Haney's standpoint, he's always said, listen, he just wants to fight. He said he doesn't duck any smoke. And I mean, the track record is starting to show, right? He fighting big names after big names. This one in particular, I think, is a pretty dangerous fight because the Jose Ramirez fight actually wasn't at welterweight, right? So this is going to be his debut at welterweight. He's going against a young, strong champion who's on a good streak, seems to be getting better each fight. So, do you give props to Devin Haney, or are you just saying, "Hey, he's just handling business the way he should handle business"?
I mean, like you said, Devin Haney he continues to prove that he's always with the smoke. He'll fight anyone, anywhere, and like he's always been saying, you know, shut up and fight, right?
Mhm.
All they do is say, all they say anything but let's fight. And
Yeah,
I gotta respect it. Devin Haney's really he comes from an old school, he has an old school type of pedigree to him. I respect it because no one expected him to come out, move up in weight, and fight a big puncher in Brian Norman Jr. Brian Norman Jr. isn't, I would say, the most skilled fighter. What you see is really what you get. I think he's one dimensional, but he's still a big puncher. He's strong, and he's not like a garbage fighter at all.
yeah,
So I respect it. I respect. It's definitely a respectable opponent for sure moving up. And if Haney wins, it adds on to his legacy.
yeah. And I heard that they're petitioning the committees to try to strip Boots, so Boots titles can be on the line for this fight. So with Brian holding one of the titles, I think Boots holding two titles, but Boots said he's going to 54, right? So I don't know if it'll be one of Boots' belts, both of his belts. So this fight could potentially be for three titles, which means the stakes are very high. I mean, you'll be one belt away from undisputed. For Devin Haney's case, if he were to have three belts at welterweight, one belt away from undisputed, he probably cements himself as a Hall of Famer, right?
Easily. If he even wins one title, I think he's a Hall of Famer. If he
Yeah.
beats Brian Norman just for the one title, which I would actually prefer, because it's like, why y'all just now trying to add more belts for one fight? I would
Mhm.
rather, my stance. I feel like it's more impactful when the fighter is fighting for each belt. That I think, cements your legacy even more. But if they do add it, I mean, that could be the proper motivation Devin Haney needs.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely cements him automatically.
What I will say about Turkey Al Sheikh is like this dude is like no secrets. He wants action. He wants action packed fights. We've been seeing Devin Haney utilize the ring a lot, do a lot of moving. People said he's kind of wary of big punchers, right? We saw the Ryan Garcia fight. So what does Turkey Al Sheikh do? He puts him in there with a big puncher, Brian Norman Jr., someone who's probably going to be maybe close to comparable in size to Devin Haney as he's been fighting at welterweight longer. So even after rehydration, they may be comparable in size. And if you watch Brian Norman's fights, I think he is a guy you can say who has a solid left hook. So it seems like Turkey Al Sheikh is still testing Devin Haney. Like, okay, let's see if your chin is there. Let's see if you can avoid the left hook. Let's see what you do against a big puncher, right? So do you think it's just being petty, or do you think this is fair? This is the type of challenges we need to see for guys like Devin Haney.
Yeah, it's definitely not petty because I think if anything, you could probably I think it was Bill Haney that actually called to make the fight happen, right? So this was when wasn't even on Turkey Al Sheikh's radar until Bill Haney kind of like nudged him, was like, "Hey, we want to make this fight happen." You get what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's definitely not petty because it didn't work out like that. But in terms of the fight happening now, Turkey's like, okay, now that's on my radar, I don't want a Tom and Jerry type of fight. So we're going to ensure probably the ring is smaller so it can, limit that. So we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't put it past Devin Haney to still try to win the fight by any means necessary, even if he has to
yeah.
fight it like Ramirez again. But we will just have to see.
What I will say about this is Brian Norman Jr. is a very athletic guy. He's not kind of like flat-footed Ramirez, right? Then Regis Prograis had pop, but seemed like it felt like he had dinosaur arms in there versus Devin Haney, right? His arms just felt too short.
Yeah.
It, I don't know. I think the size, the athleticism, and the power of Brian Norman, I think Devin Haney has a lot to think about going into this fight. So, I mean, I don't want to do
Yeah.
predictions, but just early sentiment, right? If you were to say, hey, they're going to set the money line for this fight, who do you think should be favored going into this fight?
Oh, Brian Norman Jr. I think he's
Yeah.
the favorite going into this fight. Yeah. Like you mentioned, just the sheer punching power. According to BoxRec, I believe they have Regis and Brian Norman Jr. the same height. So the height is the same. Stature similar. Brian Norman's obviously bigger than Regis.
What's the
Um,
reach? That's a
the
big one.
reach, the reach, his arms is a little longer. His arms, I think, is just as long as Devin Haney's. But I mean, the fact that he's just punching up there, you know what I mean? I
Ooh,
think that it might be an inch over Devin Haney.
72-inch reach.
Yeah, Devin Haney's is like 71 or 72.
S-
But like, I don't know. I would just have to wait and see because the difference between Norman and Ryan Garcia was significantly faster with the left hook than Brian Norman. And
Yeah,
that that's more dangerous to me. It depends on how, I guess, Brian Norman Jr. sets it up. He's gonna touch Haney. He's gonna touch him
yes.
up. Just a matter of just whether or not he can make, like make his moves effective. And we got to see what type of Devin Haney we get because I felt like Devin Haney, the way he fought Ramirez, he didn't even have to fight that fight. Like even certain points when he was throwing his punches, it was through blistering speed. It was touching Ramirez. It was kind of stunning Ramirez. Like it was stun him,
Hmm.
take a second, and then try to like walk in. And I felt like if Haney wanted to really stop him and really stand toe to toe, he would have stopped Ramirez. I honestly believe that. Just going back and watching that fight and just looking how the punches, how sharp he was. So not to say the same is going to happen with Brian Norman, right? Because it's another weight class up, but
Hmm.
Norman Jr. is definitely the favorite though going into this fight.
But when a guy has the ability or maybe the potential to stop someone and he's stunning someone, but instead of continuing to work, he gets out of there. What do you think that is? Do you think that's mental? Do you think it's I guess natural, like natural course of action, or do you think something? Do you think it was a mental reason, like a mental shortcoming, why he did that? Was it the fear of what could happen if I stay in here too long?
Yeah, it could be that. Also, could be what people have been saying with Bill Haney telling Devin Haney, especially with Shane Mosley saying like Bill Haney told Devin Haney not to really engage. And because he was in Devin Haney's ear, Devin Haney they went with that game plan, right? So that was the game plan that they decided to operate under, not to engage and to just box and move and whatever the case be, not to take any type of damage, probably in hopes of lining up the Ryan Garcia fight, not take any risk, no damage. So when they go into the Ryan Garcia fight, they'll be much more healthy, right? That's a part of it, but also maybe just like me not taking those hits, I don't have to have that shell factor or the shock factor of getting hit like I did with Ryan Garcia. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
both could be true. You know what I mean? So that's how I see it.
I'm gonna end on this note. I don't think that fight's going the distance.
You got Norman stopping on Haney.
I just don't think the fight's going the distance.
He said, "I got Norman slaughter." All right, let me ask you this: Is
Yeah.
it would it be reminiscent of what Norman Jr. did in Japan?
Nah, nah,
All
nah,
right,
nah.
all right.
I think, and I don't think it's gonna necessarily go this way, right? But this is my hypothetical, just because you threw Brian Norman out there. I'm not saying who's gonna stop who, but because you threw Brian Norman out there,
Uh-huh.
I think if Brian Norman gets a stoppage, it'll look more similar to those rounds where Lomachenko had Haney in a lot of trouble, but just couldn't get him out of there. And it was like Haney kind of looked like a deer in headlights. I think you would see something like Norman overwhelming him with volume and power, maybe in the corner. And I think it'd be like a ref stoppage, like no more. You know what I mean? But if Brian were to stop him, that's how I imagine him stopping him.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, to be honest, personally, I don't think Norman can win going to the decision. I think if he wins, it would be by TKO or KO, right? Like
Yeah.
stoppage. But if Haney wins, personally, if he does happen to win, I think it would be a decision. But as we get closer, we'll have to sit and ponder
Yeah.
and think more about it and see what happens. So.